Welcome in to another edition of Carps Corner. Sorry, been slow the last couple of weeks. Been teaching my class at Ohio State, and with that comes a lot of responsibility. We got kids sports, and I'm trying to get over to watch practice and everything. And sometimes the nights get away from me, and the early morning radio wears me down. And so I again we're dragging a little bit, but I promise we'll get that all remedied. We'll be ready to go here throughout the rest of the summer. Maybe even have some big announcements for some programming stuff in the fall and what we ultimately could have going there. So pretty exciting stuff going on. But I wanted to focus this show post spring game, end of spring ball recap, kind of what we learned, what ultimately happened in spring practice that was important to take note of. And everybody sees the spring game, and so that's the most visual part of it. But Ryan does a really good job of expressing this, and a lot of coaches do as well. And while that's the main part that the fans see, it's still just one piece of the pie, and it's really 1/15 as far as practice days go. Now, does it count for a little more than that? Probably. You're in the horseshoe. You got 75, 80,000 people in there. It was a beautiful day. There's the pressure on you. I mean, it's the closest thing you're going to get to a game day experience and not actually playing in a game. That counts. You're going against your own guys, so it's some scripted stuff. But being in the shoe, pressure on, like at the culmination of the spring, they keep it simple. Now, some of the guys didn't play, so we always want to look at Kyle McCord and look at the quarterbacks and everything else. But they're seeing a limited playbook. Offenses or defenses are seeing a limited playbook. These guys know what they've been doing against each other all spring. And if you don't have your dudes out there, it's tough. And so you saw what happened with Marvin Harrison when he got out there, ran through the defense a lot. Well, partially because the defense isn't game planning to stop him. And obviously that made it a lot easier for Kyle McCord when he was out there as well. So big time opportunity there on Saturday, but not the end all be all when you look at it like that and seeing everything. So some takeaways from the spring game. Actually, first, before we get some takeaways from the spring game, I want to listen to a couple clips here that we've got from Kyle McCord and then Ryan Day. And Kyle McCord kind of gets it. He understands exactly what the gravity of the spring game is, but it's also just 1/15. And so while it's important to kind of understand what you did in that game, it's also important to come out of it and feel healthy, feel good, make sure like you made some progress, not just in that game, but really the entire spring. So with that, let's take a listen.
Every year you take a step in the right direction, whether that's spring and then into fall camp into the season. I think you learn a lot along the way, and I think you get out of it what you put into it. I think the more film you watch, the more reps you get. I think it helps you take those steps. So I mean, year three, I feel pretty good. I feel like I came a long way than where I was when I first got here. So I feel like I'm in a good spot right now.
You heard him there, taking steps. The reps, the film, the practice, all of those things matter for Kyle McCord. We'll get into all of his stuff in the spring game. I'll have a full breakdown here. But first, I want to hear some things about Ryan Day. Ryan Day's comments on his young quarterback and what he looked like.
I think what you saw in the game was similar to what you've seen in practice. Some good things, some things that you'd like to see a little bit better, but he's growing. I think that the picture sometimes was clean, other times not as clean. I think when Marvin only played a couple drives there, and then he was out, and certainly not having a Mecca and Julian and those guys. But as you saw, there was some sparks. I thought the throw to Carnell was an excellent one, but other stuff that he wants to look to improve on. So we'll get on the film and figure out what that was. And some of it's hard out there because there's so much going on, and it's going fast because you're calling it back and forth. So overall 15 practices, and there was improvement there.
You heard him say it. Kyle's growing. Maybe he didn't have all the weapons out there, and you saw and he addressed when Marvin was out there cleaning the picture up. Obviously, the offensive line has a ways to go, especially on the right side. So you don't always have a clear picture to look at defensively, and then obviously in his face with the defensive line, that made it a little bit tougher as well. Because while you couldn't get hit, still you saw Mike Hall in his face on a couple of his throws that he missed ever so slightly. But also just had 15 opportunities to improve, and Ryan feels like he improved. We'll get into the game and how he did, but I think that Ryan made a good point there. And then Ryan also talked about this with the defense and where they're at in year two of this Jim Knowles scheme.
Everything's faster. They're moving faster. They're seeing it, and I think being year two in the system, adding Davis in there, you're starting to see the secondary move faster, make more plays, be more decisive.
It's year two. Defense is improving. playing faster. You can see more confidence and being more decisive in the secondary. And those things are all great. And that just comes a lot of times from scheme comfortability, knowing what you're supposed to do. So now, instead of focusing maybe on what you're supposed to do, you can look at what the offense is doing. You can focus on things like splits and releases and formations and all these different things, down and distance, all the stuff that once you know what you're supposed to do and have that down cold, makes it a lot easier for you. And so that's a big piece right there. So some takeaways from the spring game. Number one, we've heard the coaches talk about this. They've got a lot of good tight ends. Start talking about Cade Stover, Joe Royer, goodness, G. Scott, guys coming back. Got a really good young freshman as well. And so there's 4 dudes right there that I think can get on the field. And so personnel and formation variability is huge, and Ryan's brought some of that back. You saw last year, you got in a little I formation, under center, just some things that you haven't traditionally done if you're Ohio State. And so what that forces defenses to do is to adjust to a lot. So you saw them in the game getting some 12 personnel, which is 2 tight ends, 2 wide receivers, and 1 running back. And then even a little bit of 13, which is 3 tight ends, 1 running back, 1 wide receiver. And so I think you're going to see some of this during the season. Now, granted, you're about 6 deep, I think, with good wide receivers, guys that can play and go out there and make plays in a big way. But to be able to get versatile and maybe run the ball a little more effectively, take some heat off of that offensive line, 12 and 13 are going to be useful. And I think it'll help, obviously, to create uncertainty for a defense that when you look at it, this offense, they're not going to have the dynamic CJ Stroud throwing the football. Kyle McCord is going to be good, and he's going to continue to get better. But we're going to be judging Kyle McCord off CJ Stroud's last game after being a 2-year starter. Kyle's not there yet. He's going to improve. They're going to continue to grow the offense, just like they did with Justin Fields, just like they did with CJ Stroud. So it's going to look a little different. And having these different elements and formations and personnel groupings only helps your quarterback immensely. So Ryan has always been creative with that. And so much of college football now is just so bland. Line up at 3 wide receivers, maybe 4. You have a tight end out there, gun with a running back, maybe pistol, whatever. And that's it. You see in the NFL, teams getting a variety of personnel groupings, and they try to do that and utilize their personnel because it makes it harder on the defense. There's more to prepare for. And it's not just morale, it's like different personnel combinations, so different schemes. So you've got to try to get other groupings on the field. Do I go with a 3rd linebacker? Do I put another safety out there? How do I stop when there's 2 tight ends or maybe even 3? And I'll tell you this, it's a mismatch when you start talking about those 3 tight ends, the 4 guys they have, how athletic they are. You can flex one of them out, and all of a sudden you got some issues. You flex 2 of them. I'll take my 3rd tight end on a linebacker, my 2nd tight end on a linebacker. Like, those are good matchups to have, especially when those guys are that athletic and gifted. So I like what Ryan was doing there, breaking it a little bit. I think that's some of that's even the influence that you're seeing of offensive line coach and run game coordinator, whatever his title is, co-coordinator, Justin Fry, who came over from UCLA. Him and Ryan are very tight. They understand that they look at things a little differently. And because of that, there's a lot of ideas that go back and forth, and you can see that manifesting itself. So let's look at Kyle McCord. All right. I thought Kyle McCord had a really good spring. He improved every week. That doesn't mean he was without flaws. That doesn't mean he was without mistakes, but that's part of it. I saw a guy that was challenging. He was pressing. He was taking on leadership roles. His teammates respond well to him. I saw him throw some really nice balls. Ball to Ballard on the sideline, nice. Over top, drop it in the bucket. The TD pass to Tate, which was 37 yards. That was really nice. Yeah, maybe he missed an out earlier in the game to Marvin. And the coverage gets distorted because I think the defense almost knows what you're doing on some of the plays. He missed a couple throws. There's a lot of pressure on him. But you're going to have that. What I saw, though, is a guy that was capable of making those high-end throws. So you saw that. Pretty consistent. Is he perfectly consistent? No, but that's where that growth is going to come from. I remember Justin Fields going 4-13, struggling in the spring. And I remember watching him throw the ball when he first got here and thought, my goodness, like, this guy's supposed to be that elite. I heard my friend Ryan Clark, up at ESPN, tell me he saw him in a 7-on-7 with Trevor Lawrence in high school. Said, this is the best dude you're going to see. And then I watched him struggle throwing the football. But you know what he did? He worked all summer at it. continue to get better and better and better. And then you watch the guy who is capable of making all the throws. So I have full confidence in Kyle McCord that he'll be able to do that. And honestly, I think Devin Brown is going to come back and continue to push him. And I like having that competition go through the summer, go into the fall, into summer camp, because that's only going to make Kyle better. And you know what? If Devin Brown's better, go for it. I don't think that that'll probably happen, but pressing him is going to be good. And competition is good. It doesn't always feel great. They showed some really nice throws. Not a lot of deep shots, and everybody falls in love with CJ throwing the ball deep, him and Justin doing all that stuff. You'll get that. Part of it is the offensive line wasn't capable of really holding up that long. He had limited time in the pocket. I know he couldn't get hit, but Mike Hall was in there a couple times, saw pressure off the edge there a little bit. So there's just a number of things that you saw with Kyle. He's going to continue to improve. He's going to continue to get better. But I liked what I saw. I like his command. I really liked his leadership. Jaden Ballard. So Jaden is got Marvin, Emeka and Julian, Xavier Johnson, Jaden Ballard. And you know what you're getting impressed by is Carnell Tate, another guy we're going to talk about. And there were some of the other young guys who stepped up and made some plays. You start talking about Jaden Ballard potentially being your fifth receiver. And what was really advantageous for him is Marvin wasn't going to play very much. Julian Fleming and Emeka Ibuka, they were both out. And then Xavier Johnson ends up hurting his foot. So by default, Jaden Ballard becomes the alpha dog of that game. He becomes the number one. And sometimes when you put guys in a situation where they have to go and stretch themselves and excel, and they can't not hide, but be the second or third option. They've got to be the dude. They grow into that role. I saw that happen a lot with Jaden Ballard. Not just the top-off guy. You saw him run some deep routes, but running the overs, running the outs, running the mid-range game. Those are the things that Brian Hartline has been pressing on him to make him a total receiver and to make him more consistent at it, to make sure, heck, his roommate's Kyle McCord. So you have to think that he's going to be kind of locked in on knowing what's going on, and those guys are going to be working together. So I have full confidence that he's going to be there. And if he can be a guy that can take the top off the defense and have some of those other routes, combos built in, holy smokes, man. Talking about some really, really, really impressive opportunities. It's going to be a heck of an offense because when you have that deep threat, oh boy, it'll open a lot up for Marvin, for Emeka, for Julian. I mean, heck, Carnell Tate can do some stuff, the tight ends underneath. And even if he doesn't get, 60 snaps a game, he may only be getting 25, but I think he's a guy that those 25 could be very impactful. And believe me, NFL scouts watched him on Pro Day, and they watched him have one of his best receiving days yet. And I'm like, man, they loved him. The route variation, him building consistency was huge. Number 17, Carnell Tate. You saw the big plays there. He's flashed all spring, and he's going to play this year. He's going to be out there. They're going to find a way. I know I just mentioned crowded receiver room. I'm mentioning all these tight ends. They're going to find a way to get Carnell Tate on the field. So I think Brian Hartline comes from the school, and the same with James Laurinaitis and some of the guys who I played around. Kerry Combs believed this. Luke Fickle was a big believer in it. And some coaches vary on it. But if you're good enough to be on the field and you've earned the right, I'm not going to unseat a starter, but we're going to get you out there. And the leaders and the veterans know that helps. It helps build the continuity of the program. It helps build the power of the unit. And it also continues to prepare the program to keep rolling. And you're not worried about the future, but you also need to know those guys need to be developed. Because as you saw last year, injuries happen, running back room, receiver room. As good as they are, you can get decimated. So you need to develop that depth, especially early in the season. Carnell Tate's going to play. He's going to play, man. He's going to make some plays out there. Chip Trainum, another guy I think helped himself a lot. It's been kind of that veteran presence in the running room. And Dallin Hayden played well too. Both of those guys, I really liked what they did. But Chip Trainum especially, you saw that elite speed. And I think he's a guy with his size and speed. You can get him at tailback. You can get him with two tailbacks on the field. You can get him at H-back a little bit. You can move him around. He's big enough to be a lead blocker. He's got elite speed. He catches the ball pretty well. And I thought he had a good spring. But he showed some of that versatility, showed the toughness, all of those things, with Trayvon out and Henderson and obviously Mayan being out. They're still working some guys back in. I thought Chip really seized the opportunity and did a heck of a job. So I'm excited. And one of the other things you've seen is Marvin Harrison. You saw him in the slot a little more. I mean, they're going to probably move him inside, move him outside. They'll roll him all around. That way you can't get a beat on him. And so he's been practicing all over the place. He's smart enough to handle it. So when your guy's smart enough to handle it, you let him take as much as he can ultimately give. Defensive tackles, because the inside's been a little soft. And just with depth. Mike Hall, boom, he's fine. You got to find another one. You got Ty Williams. I thought he had some flashes this spring. Still needs to get in better shape. I think this is a big summer for him to get in there. Ty Hamilton, I thought, played pretty well, and he's starting to become more consistent. Remember, his brother, it really wasn't until end of junior, more senior year that he finally turned it on, and it all kind of clicked for him. I like Ty Hamilton a lot. I think he can be a really consistent piece. The big dude who, you brought in, who's a young guy, but Hero Canoe, I thought, flashed and made some plays too. Now, I'm hoping that's not just due to the fact that the offensive line gets real thin in a hurry. But all three of those guys, I thought, made some plays the last couple of weeks of spring, and then they showed it and backed it up by making some plays in the spring ball. And I'm not even talking about Mike Hall, because Mike Hall, he's on another level from those dudes. Thought some of the young linebackers played well. Cody Simon did a good job stepping up, especially after Steele got hurt. He was kind of the alpha dog then. Both Steele and Tommy were down. And so he was running the show. But CJ Hicks flashed, and you saw him get his hands on the football. And guys know that he's a playmaker. He can make those plays. The thing for CJ is a little bit like Jaden Ballard. He's got elite athleticism. He's made some plays. It's the consistency. It's not how high your ceiling is. It's sometimes what's your floor. And so he's working at it. He's getting better, but that's the problem with all young players. And so CJ hadn't got a chance to play a ton. I think he'll be on the field more this year. If he practices and has a fall camp like he had this spring, continues to listen and lock in, and he's a dude that's hungry for knowledge. Like, he wants to get better. He can continue to do that. He'll have earned the right to be on the field. And I know that James will press to get him out there, because that is how he believes you operate. Guys have earned the right. You get him on the field. And I thought Reed Carrico played pretty good. Reed had a pretty good job finishing up this spring. He plays hard as heck, does a good job getting off blocks. And, I think that there may be some opportunities for him to get out there as well. He's played hard. He's got to continue to finish plays. But I thought you've seen him trigger fast, make some plays, got in the backfield a couple times this spring game, mixed results. Sometimes he got him down, a couple times he slid off. And so you've just got to continue to make sure you finish those plays and continue to move. Right tackles continue to be an issue as you look at it. I mean, KJ, Kenyatta Jackson, Sawyer, Caden Curry. I mean, those guys, the defensive line did pretty much most of what they wanted, especially when some of they weren't in with the starters. But those are the questions, because all those guys were winning a lot. And Caden Curry is always around the ball. He's got a nose for the football. You see him there getting hands on it, diving on fumbles, like being around sacks. Like, he's just always there. And he's going to be on the field this year. Sawyer, I think, made some big jumps. And then I think that third defensive tackle or end could ultimately be Kenyatta Jackson, who really shows you a lot. It'll be interesting to see if they end up kicking Sawyer or JT down inside at all, as well in some rushing situations, if they start to package that up this fall, just to get your best four out there. Larry loves the rushman. That's big. The O-line, I think, is the biggest question coming out of camp, more so than the quarterback. Now, I don't know if there's a tackle in the portal that would help this team. I've talked to, Jeremy Birmingham. He's locked in on recruiting. Berm knows everything. I just don't think that there might be a guy out there, unless you're getting someone who might have problems, and there's a reason why he's leaving his team, or someone who may not be able to play on this level. And so, you have Tegra Shabola. I think he's going to be ready to go. Zabahalski, I think he'll be there eventually. I just don't think either one of those guys, they're young, and I don't think they're physically quite there yet. It's going to be a huge summer for both of them. If one of them proves they can, have an anchor, can be physical, can get a little bit better footwork, I think they can play. But the question you have to ask yourself, for every position at Ohio State, is this a national championship caliber player we have here? Can we win a national title with this person playing at the pace they're playing and the level they're playing right now? And if not, then either A, they've got to raise their level, or B, you've got to find someone to get out there. So that's going to be the tough part, is looking in, trying to dial in on that. The QB, like I said, with Kyle, the position's going to be different and it'll look a little different than last year, but it'll be fine. I'm fully confident in that. The defensive backs, I think, have improved dramatically. I think that's a big piece of it. And the D-line is looking a lot better this year. Not that they were bad, but they've been looking really good. And I'm just hoping that's not relative to the competition. So we'll see how that goes. That's something that, I mean, good D-line makes a good secondary, makes good linebackers. It makes the world hum. You gotta get that offensive line honed in. I believe I have a lot of confidence in Justin Fry. He's a heck of a coach, but sometimes you can only improve guys so much so quickly. And some of that's going to be on Mickey Marotti this offseason, the weight room, pressing those guys, toughening them up, firming them up, and getting them going. And, talking to some of the coaches. Remember, Paris Johnson had some issues even last year in camp, and he's going to be a first-round pick. So things happen. Guys can get better, they improve, and that's what we're banking on. But that's it for this edition of Carps Corner. We'll have a lot more stuff. We'll get some other things. Brian, my man Brian Hartline, wrecked his side by side. He's going to be fine. Coach had a good time. He's at home driving around, maybe being a little foolish late on Saturday night. You wreck your ATV side by side, man. He's good. He'll be fine, and not worried about him. We got some news maybe for the Browns coming to Ohio Stadium. We'll get into that later in this week. So there's a lot of stuff there. So please subscribe, like, share, enjoy it. Leave some comments, and thanks for tuning in.